You mentioned the Fed, and you say the Fed's behind the curve. They're always behind the curve. But I don't remember the Greenspan Fed ever being behind the curve. They were always a step ahead. They always moved before the market. They signaled, and then they moved. Whereas this Fed is just waiting for the market to react, and then it moves. And I don't know if they have as much weight and as much gravitas as as the Fed of years past has. I think they're being marginalized.
Well, you make 2 points here. One, yeah, the Fed is marginalized. Clearly, Bessent has said we're not really paying attention to short-term rates. We're paying attention to the 10-year, which makes more sense. It's a bigger driver of the economy. But the first point you made, the Fed, the Greenspan Fed used to be ahead. If you're in an environment where monetary policy is driving the economy, yeah, then the Fed can be ahead because they're making the decisions that's driving the economy. We're not in that environment anymore. We're in an environment where not monetary policy, but fiscal policy is driving the economy. So this Fed is sort of behind the curve. They're reacting rather than
But
proacting.
hey, everybody, welcome back to Markets and Madness. Tim and I today, as we say, the place where we discuss the madness that occurs when politics, economics, and personalities all move in different direction. Good morning, Tim. We have,
Morning, Fred. I've been reading through some of the comments we're getting.
yeah,
You guys out there who are paying attention have a lot to say, and we welcome it. It's glad that I'm glad that you're actually looking through our heads. We try to crawl through other people's heads. I keep crawling through Trump's head. Unfortunately, I never get past Melania, which is, I think, a problem that
stuck in a loop. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. So, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, ring the bell, get the new content, and let us know what you're thinking. We appreciate the likes. We appreciate the comments. Help us grow it. So, having said that, are we at the beginning of the sell-off? Is this the back and fill in the equity markets? I don't, I'm not comfortable with stocks now. I think for the next month or two, we're on that downtrade.
yeah, we're off what, depending on where you look, 8-9% from the
Right.
highs, and nobody seems nervous about it.
Right.
We got the buy and holders and the people trying to catch the falling knife and buy the dips, and yeah, but we're on the same page here. We're both, the Fed gets a lot of grief because it jumps in too late. But you put yourself in a position of the Fed. It's like when you see the light of a star, you know, it's already gone. You're seeing it, what happened 10,000 years ago. And the Fed kind of waits for validation. And if they jump early, they don't know if they're jumping right because the data doesn't show up until it's too late to do anything about it.
Right.
So this
Well,
Fed now is looking at data and sort of signaling that their sentiment is saying you're going to need 2 rate cuts, which tells me they see a slowdown coming, which is consistent with
right.
our scenario.
Political view will tell you there's a slowdown coming, right? I mean, that's what the Treasury Secretary essentially said. It's what the president has said, that there's going to be a slowdown coming with all the layoffs, so front loading all of this. It's what we've been talking about for a couple of months now.
Yeah, since the election,
Yeah.
and, and DOGE is focusing on a lot of stuff. I think it's unbelievable that they're lighting this Tesla's on fire. I mean, they got to be out of ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy, as one of our friends on social media said the other day. Aren't these people that are lighting Teslas on fire like eating their own? Like, weren't these the people 2 months ago, 3 months ago that were so supportive of a Green New Deal and everything else? I don't know. Makes no sense to me. I don't, not a big proponent of violence in any shape or form, and that just makes no sense. But yeah, yeah. In terms of equities, I think we're the beginning of a down move. Can we go another 10%? Yeah, why not? you know. And we've talked about this a number of times before. You mentioned the Fed, and you say the Fed's behind the curve. They're always behind the curve. But I don't remember the Greenspan Fed ever being behind the curve. They were always a step ahead. You know, they always moved before the market. They signaled, and then they moved. Whereas this Fed is just waiting for the market to react, and then it moves. And I don't know if they have as much weight and as much gravitas as as the Fed of years past has. I think they're being marginalized.
Well, you make 2 points here. One, yeah, the Fed is marginalized. Clearly, Bessent has said we're not really paying attention to short-term rates. We're paying attention to the 10-year, which makes more sense. It's a bigger driver of the economy. But the first point you made, the Fed, the Greenspan Fed used to be ahead. If you're in an environment where monetary policy is driving the economy, yeah, then the Fed can be ahead because they're making the decisions that's driving the economy. We're not in that environment anymore. We're in an environment where not monetary policy, but fiscal policy is driving the economy. So this Fed is sort of behind the curve. They're reacting rather than proacting.
But it seems like this Fed has been behind the curve for the last 6 years. You know, they tighten too late, they ease too quickly. It's like they're always a step behind. Where I didn't see that with Greenspan. You know, he left these little trial balloons out to the market and then moved, and the market followed.
Well, okay, I'll respond to that by saying that Janet Yellen was a big piece of that. She wasn't in the Fed anymore. She was a Treasury, but she had a lot to say,
Right.
and a lot of influence on the Fed. And I'm going to use the word politicized because I think the Fed was politicized. I don't think that Fed said anything against the administration. Just the use of the word transitory as inflation was starting to run rampant was really blatant example of the Fed just following the curve. So I think that's really why you saw what you saw.
If you think of two Fed chairmen, comparing them to Greenspan, so transitory would be the word for Yellen, and irrational exuberance would be the term for Greenspan, right?
Yeah, that's true. The one thing I remember about Greenspan, and Greenspan learned his lesson early, you had Greenspan follow Volcker, and the market was very uncomfortable with the loss of Volcker. I remember those days very clearly. So Greenspan takes over, and I wrote an article one time where he followed the Europeans. He went to Europe and he was holding hands with all the European central banks, worrying about inflation, when in fact inflation wasn't the problem. Disinflation was the problem. And we had a spike. They took rates up unnecessarily, fighting inflation that wasn't there. And we had the 87 crash as a result of that. And I think Greenspan learned his lesson over that. You know, I used to follow Fed very carefully in those years because the Fed was important.
Yeah,
I don't think this Fed's important.
yeah, I agree. They are marginalized, and we'll see how long that lasts. As long as DOGE continues to get results, and there's the people that don't believe any of these results. You know, I guess I don't know how else they can prove it. I did see something last night, that the guy that they referred to as Big Balls is coming
Yeah.
out on an interview and explaining.
Was that him
I think so.
on
Sam?
on
Sam?
Laura Ingraham? Yeah, the guy with the
Yeah.
golf shirt.
Yeah,
Oh, I didn't realize that was Big Balls.
I think that's him. Yeah,
Wow, he was very lucid, and
I didn't see that, but I heard that he had given an interview, and Musk is bringing people out that are heavily involved.
it wasn't Musk, it was Bessent. He was sitting beside Bessent.
Oh, okay.
And Bessent said, "I thought I'd bring him in to show." And they asked him what he saw as the surprising thing, and he said the disconnect between management and you got good people there. He said, but you ask them why this $50 million system is in place, and they shrugged their shoulders and said, I don't know why. And the gist of that was that the consulting companies were really driving and delaying the process. He said there was something like 15 years behind a systems development, and hundreds of $50 million over budget. It was really ludicrous.
I saw a clip of Musk talking about what he referred to as the money machines
Yeah,
that just
yeah,
printed money.
14 different systems that just deliver money and we don't know why.
That's right. They're set up.
Pixie dust. It's,
Yeah. I guess it's like when you apply for something on your phone and it's $4 a month and you forget about it, and then 3 years later you realize you've been paying $4 a month,
That's
and the government's
exactly
doing
right.
it, and the government's doing it a $50 million clip at a time, right?
Yeah, that's true. I learned yesterday that New Jersey Easy Pass is charging me $1 a month for the transponder. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah. That you're renting the transponder for $12 a year. Probably not a bad, but at least I'd like to know about it.
That's
I
right.
don't know anything about it.
Right.
For you economists out there, the people that, I sort of thought about it the other day. I was giving a talk at my group on Thursday, and we're moving from, how did I put this? We're moving from a Keynesian economy to a Friedman economy. We're going from Keynesian stimulus to organic Friedman growth, to money supply and output driven as opposed to monetary policy driven. The problem with an economy that runs on monetary policy is the Fed balance sheet grows and ultimately it's got to be drained. So it's temporary add all the time. When you have organic growth, you got the private sector hiring people. We're not borrowing for that. We don't have to print for that. The private sector does it with its own investment. And that's the difference in the two economies. One is much healthier than the other. So I think that's where we're heading, and we're transitioning to that, and we're in that transition period right now.
Yeah, and that's the initial pain as you go through those steps.
Yeah.
You gotta knock it down in order to build it back up.
We weigh 500 pounds. We got to lose 300 pounds before we start working out and getting healthy again.
Right, right. And that's, people don't appreciate the fact that you have to lose those 300 pounds. It takes some effort and takes some work, and it's going to affect some parts of your, parts of everything.
It's going to affect your life.
Yeah, yeah. What else did I want to bring up? Oh, did you see the Democrat, I guess the senator from Arizona, talking? He traded in his Tesla. We were talking about burning.
Oh, yeah, yeah. His brother is an astronaut, or he's an
Yeah,
astronaut.
I think he was the astronaut, and he bought a Chevy Tahoe.
Yeah, right.
These are the same, once again, the same people in the Green New Deal that, I don't know. As you say, they're out of ideas.
Well, I think the bigger issue, I lived in California for a while, and this struck me in California. California was like a big facade. I went to buy a barbecue grill, and I had a gas pipe run into the house, so I wanted a barbecue grill that I could hook it to the gas pipe. And I said to the guy, does this barbecue, can I put a gas pipe in? He said, oh, yeah, sure, yeah. And I looked at him in the eye, and I said, are you sure? And he stopped and he said, well, let me go find out. It turned out he was full of shit. He just gave me the response. But he did it so well that it dawned on me that I was in a place where people could really fluff up the answers and deliver it so well that, I had a pretty good bullshit filter. But this guy managed, he almost bullshitted me. And we're in that kind of style versus substance world. So when somebody comes on and deliver, and that's what this Tesla thing is all about. They're caught up in the style, the statement, the symbolism of a Tesla, and they're really concerned about the symbol more than they are the substance.
Yeah.
And
That's
I
so
really
true.
think that's my Seinfeldish observation that I can give here.
Yeah, I think that's so true. It's my enemy's enemy is my friend. Right?
Well, you take two presidents. Obama was loaded with style, and he smiled, and you listened to him, and you said, "This guy's really in touch." But his policies were horrific.
Yeah.
Biden had neither. He didn't have style or substance. Trump has more substance than style. If you're a diehard, conservative Republican, then you think he has style, and he's got style that appeals to that group. That's the group that he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue
Right.
and they'll be behind him. But he's more substantive. He's got a view of the world that I think is 3D, and it's beyond. Just look. I've been thinking about. We talked a little bit about this the other day with last week with Alex, and I think he's viewing this world and viewing the changing the post-war world. He's looking at the world and saying, World War II was over in 1945, and we haven't moved on. Our policies were post-war policies, and now we've got to get post-war policy, certainly in terms of defense. And he said to Europe, you got to take care of your own defense now.
Right.
Boost your budget. It's your problem. It's not my problem. He's looking at the Middle East, and he's appointing Israel and Saudi Arabia, the local marshals in the Middle East. He's looking to Asia, and he's saying, Japan, Australia, you guys are my guys in Australia, in Asia. He's looking at Latin America, and I don't know, the jury's out there, but he's saying, okay, we're going to take back Panama, our sphere of influence. And when he talks about this dome, maybe Argentina is his marshal in that region. And when he talks about this dome, he's talking about a dome not just over the continental United States. He's talking about the dome that encompasses Greenland and Panama. And that's what he sees. And I think they're repositioning the Defense Department for that. That whole Defense Department budget with the Iron Dome and everything else he's going to do is all around North and South America to encompass Greenland and Canada. And I think that's what the focus is. This guy is really rethinking, reshuffling the deck.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Talk about thinking outside of the box. He doesn't even realize there's a box.
Exactly.
He's changing things completely. And he's moving so quickly that his detractors don't have time to put up their fences and their walls and fight him. They're just scrambling. Whether
Well,
it be the Democrats or the Europeans, they don't know where to go. So we've seen the Germans increase their defense budget. We've seen the UK talk about Ukraine, boots on the ground, planes in the air. So things are changing there. He's certainly able to get that, moving forward.
Well, the Democrat strategy is clear. Let's flood the zone with judges and try to run out the clock and see if we can prevent him from doing a lot of what he's trying to do before the midterm elections. They want to keep him in that trough for as long as they can, that economic trough. Yeah, it's politics. It's a sad state of affairs, but it's what we got.
Yeah. Did you read any of the Kennedy stuff? Do any insight on the Kennedy assassination stuff?
No. It's I read a book about it. It was a fiction book, but it was from a guy who's been involved in the investigations over the years, and it looks like he was signaling what seems to be the case, that there's so many different variations on the theme that you can point to a lot of different places, and you really can't assign blame. Was it the CIA? Was it the mafia? Was it, But it'll be interesting. The more and more comes out. But, it's 50 years ago, 70 years ago.
60 years ago, yeah.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah, it should. My only point about it is if some of these things about the government involved in a certain way, whether it's LBJ, the CIA, joined together, Dulles, I've been reading a lot about Alan Dulles. George Bush was there at the book depository that day, and then when he was questioned about it, said, "I don't know where I was that day. I don't remember. I don't recall." So, yeah. So,
And Oswald was a setup, too.
yeah. So all of that, the CIA has done this in various countries throughout the world for years. What's so surprising that they would do it here, right?
I think it was George Steinbrenner, because Joe DiMaggio was jealous because JFK was dating Marilyn Monroe. and his ex-wife.
That's right. That's right. The New York Yankees. It was Scooter. Where else can we go? There was something else I wanted to run by you. We talked about the. Oh, I saw this morning that they're talking about AOC primarying Schumer for Senate in
Oh
20.
boy, would I love to see that. I would love to see Senator Kennedy from Louisiana uh, grilling AOC. I mean, that's, I would live for that. He's terrific. Are you stuck on stupid? Are you? Jeez. The guy is so good.
I saw something this morning. I guess it was an interview with Hannity, where he said, I don't hate anybody. He says, Chuck, I like Chuck Schumer. He says, wrong. He's wrong a lot. He says, but he doesn't make the same mistake once. He makes the same mistake many times. He says, just to make sure. He says, he keeps making the same mistake. He's comical, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
I
an
love,
interesting crowd in Washington.
yeah, I love that guy. I bet he really, I would like to see him. Yeah, I think this period is so many ebbs and flows and so many different factors that are playing with the markets, and all of them are really big. Any one of them could have been, headlining the news, the market news, for weeks, and they're just swept alongside with the rest of the tide. It's just
I
so many factors.
just remembered what I wanted to bring up to you was the idea of the pardons in the pen,
Oh, the auto pen.
the auto pen. I
Talk
mean,
about it. Talk about an issue.
talk about an issue that can blow up, you know?
Yeah, and that's what's weird about that. Let's just go through that for a minute. Let's just assume for a second that there's some validity to the argument that you can negate anything done by the auto pen. So we're in some form of challenge to the pardons and everything else signed by the auto pen. The auto pen is almost academic if you look at who was that the Japanese guy, the Asian Treasury guy who interviewed Biden and said he wasn't fit to stand trial or a judgment would not be. Remember that?
Right. He was a DA, wasn't he? Wasn't he a DA? I think
Yeah,
so.
it might have been. It was somebody from the Justice Department, I think,
Yeah.
maybe the
Yeah.
Treasury Department. And that you look at the date that happened, and he said that, and you can make a fair argument that that Biden was incompetent, or at least what's the term, compos mentis, is the legal term. So anything he'd signed, whether it was his signature or an auto pen signature, has got to be under question at that point, from that point, or certainly from that point on, and maybe even before that point. So that alone suggests that somebody else was running and somebody else was authorizing all this stuff. Then you add what happened with Johnson, and you tag that date to Johnson said, "Why did you do that?" And he said, "I didn't do that. The natural gas thing. I didn't sign that." And you got to wonder really whether or not he was in charge or he was capable of being in charge. So the whole argument of the auto pen just is a second argument on top of the first one, whether or not he was competent. And if we do get to a point where they actually start to have some kind of formal hearing on that, this issue could throw the market in a complete turmoil. Because what's law, what's not law, what's subject to revision, what's not, what would morally have to be reversed, so many different things.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree completely. There's a lot of questions there. And, you know, Biden can put this all to rest. He can come out and say, I'm aware of everything I did. This is what I did. This is when I did it. This is why I did it. Bang, bang, bang.
So I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you. I don't think he can put it to rest if he's compos mentis.
But that's the point. If he was able to clearly, eloquently state what he did, when he did it, why he did it, then I think that there's no grounds. But he's not been able to do
I
that.
don't think that's enough of him stating it and acting, in a moment of clarity. I think you'd have to pass a test of some sort, saying, I'm competent, I'm mentally competent now. And then you still don't know whether or not he was mentally competent then. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, but you haven't even heard anything from him. He's been,
I read something about him today. He and his wife are prepared to do everything they can to support the party, and the party's going, yeah, we'll get back to you.
right.
We'll
Enjoy
let
the
you
beach.
know.
Enjoy the beach. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
they don't want to, they don't want to touch him.
yeah, it's going to be an interesting ride.
Yeah, they're sending him to a leper colony, and he's going to wear a big bell around his neck and shout, unclean, unclean.
All right. Any other points you want to address?
If you're in the market, both of us in agreement, we think it's not a good time to enter the market. Wait, don't catch that falling knife. On the adage, I would rather miss a boat than get on one that sinks. And I think we could drop another 10% or so here.
Just to your point earlier about comments that were made, one of our friends, mutual friends, posted some stuff on social media in regards to a piece that we put with Steve last week, when Steve was saying his neighbor was looking at 5%. If he can get 5% on triple tax free, he's going to take it, not worry about the stock markets. And her point was more to, are you an investor or are you a trader? And if you're investing in triple tax frees, you really have to look at quality, rather than just the 5%. You got to look at some of the ratings, and buying something in Short Hills, a Short Hills bond as opposed to a Camden, New Jersey bond is going to be very different,
I spent several years in the Eurodollar market. And in the Eurodollar market, the credit markets, the name is more important than the number.
Right.
And credit markets tier quite dramatically. And I think we had this conversation
Yeah.
with Steve. So we're in a period now where these employment numbers are going to really start to get erode once we start, implementing some of the public sector layoffs. So credit is a big issue. Her point, Kate, it was.
Yeah. It was good. Yeah.
Her point, and I worked with her father, who
Yeah.
was a brilliant man. Her point was a valid point, but she was looking at it from the point of view of an investor. If you're an investor, yeah, you might want to start to nibble at positions and end up with a position 6 months from now and load the boat. But our position, as more short term, is you're going to find better levels to buy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I respect what you said, and we're not. It's just time frames,
Yep.
I could buy them and you could sell them, and we could both be right. It just depends on what our time frames are.
What your tolerance is. Yep. Whether you can live through it. Can you live through a 10% drawdown? If you can, yeah, it's a great opportunity. Can you live through a 30% drawdown? Well,
I mean, just to be clear, long term, I don't think anybody's more bullish than either one of us. We think these are big structural changes in the economy, and once this economy transitions, we're off to the races. Animal spirits and all the rest of it. Incentives are there, tax incentives are there, tariff incentives, all of those incentives are built for private sector growth. And they're very positive, and just like Reagan did. We had to go through an ugly period with Reagan. The problems were different. They were really monetary problems. But once that economy took hold, the rally lasted for 20 years.
right.
So we could be seeing that again, but we're in a transition period for that. We're still laying the foundations for that.
Yep. Good. That's very well said. It's time frame, short-term time frame, better opportunities to get in for a long-term boom. We could see another 20-year rally in the Dow, but we got to get through the pain first.
Yeah.
All right, Tim. Well, good chat, good talk, and have a good weekend.
All right. You too.
All right.